Bonsoir tout le monde. Je me présente, mon nom c'est Ariel Esteban Cayer, directeur de la programmation de la première et j'espère pas la dernière semaine de la critique de Montréal. Merci à tous d'être ici si nombreux encore pour un deuxième soir. Si vous étiez là hier, peut-être que vous connaissez la formule, si vous n'êtes pas là hier, bienvenue. Ce qu'on fait à la critique, c'est qu'on met des films ensemble, on met des publics ensemble pour essayer de forcer le dialogue, la conversation. Donc, comment ça va fonctionner ce soir? On a 2 longs métrages et un court métrage. Il n'y aura pas de pause entre les films. On enchaîne vraiment en mode gonzo pour avoir le plus de temps pour jaser par la suite. Donc, je vous présente le programme. On va essayer de faire ça rapidement. Donc, le programme de ce soir, les temporalités de la mort, j'ai mal écrit ça. Les temporalités de la mort se superposent dans le programme d'aujourd'hui, Chronique d'une mort annoncée, sur le thème du deuil et de la mort. Deuil d'un amour, deuil de soi, deuil de l'écosystème. C'est des films qui nous ont frappés parce que dans ces films-là, la mort est une occasion, c'est l'occasion d'un processus créatif pour leurs personnages et pour leurs cinéastes. Dans le premier film que vous allez voir, la quête d'un vêtement perdu devient l'occasion de raviver la mémoire. Dans le deuxième, l'autofiction épistolaire devient la clé des champs pour un condamné à mort, tandis qu'une balade nocturne, dans le troisième, ouvre vers une campagne cubaine qui nous donne à voir les fantômes du progrès. L'avant et l'après du trépas se superposent dans des dynamiques qui recoupent l'histoire nationale et personnelle, où l'annonceur est frappé de lumière salutaire, où le prosaïsme de l'existence terrestre s'épanche dans la candeur de la foi. Autrement dit, il est ici question de contraste entre clair et sombre, comme vous le verrez, entre le jour et la nuit, le ciel et la terre, le renouveau et la fin. Donc, il était question pour nous de faire un programme un peu en opposé, que j'espère va vous plaire. Donc, voilà. Je vais le faire dans l'anglais aussi. The temporalities of death interweave elegantly in today's program chronicles of a death foretold, dedicated to the grieving process. Whether mourning a lost love, mourning oneself, mourning one's ecosystem, these are all creative opportunities here for characters who, when faced with the idea of transience, cling on to lyrical and epic forms of legacy. The quest for a lost piece of clothing, the epistolary writing of a condemned man, or a nighttime walk or a nighttime trek through the Cuban countryside revealing the ghosts of progress. The anticipation and the aftermath of passing overlap, intersect with national histories where solitary light pierces the engulfing darkness, or where the candor of fate transcends mundanity of existence. In other words, we wanted to build a program as a game of contrast between color and black and white, night and day, and you'll see continuity in the end, and so on and so forth. So I hope you enjoy Riel, as well as Super Happy Forever, and as well as he is now in the light. I'm so sorry, Roberto. He is now in the truth. Thank you so much. And we'll see you after for a talk. Thank you so much. I'm gonna introduce the guest today, which is not something we did yesterday, but this is kind of the closest, or we're closer to sort of this panel discussion formula that we wanted to kind of put forth with the critics. So let me do that for you. First of all, Matias Meyer studied film direction at the Cinematographic Training Center at the CCC in Mexico City. Riel, or Heaven Touches the Earth, is his 6th feature film as a director, producer, and screenwriter. Previous films include Modern Loves, Yo, The Last Cristeros, The Cramp, and Wildly. His films have been programmed and awarded in festivals such as Toronto, Rotterdam, Locarno, Ficuna, and Royal. Roberto Tarazona joined in 2015 the European Film College in Denmark, where he graduated as a cinematographer and specialized in directing. In 2023, he completed a Master of Alternative Cinema at EICTV in Cuba. In 2024, he returns to EICTV to join the chair of documentary film. And Renato Rodriguez Lefebvre is a doctor in comparative literature and an author who explores different forms of prose and dabbles in translation in the context of the indigenous literatures of Guatemala. The Colonial Archive, Hybridity, The Eternal Return are part of his catalog of obsessions. J'en profite également pour remercier Spirale pour la collaboration ce soir et pour la présence. Um, c'est mon papier. Comme c'est plus, I'm gonna do this in English for your sake, Roberto, and but if at any point, sorry, if at any point you want to sort of dip into Spanish, I'm also happy to interpret, or in French, and I can also do interpret in English if we need. We kind of construct this program around this idea of time and death, the sort of intercutting that you see in Super Happy Forever between two sort of temporalities of grief. And I think this idea maybe of dilation of time that is so beautifully kind of executed in your film, Matias. But also maybe something of a sort of idea of an afterlife, which is kind of what we saw in your film, Roberto, a sort of an aesthetic kind of interpretation of maybe what that could look like, and we may be wrong there, but I wanted to kind of use that as a starting point. I'm curious to hear, where these films began for you in terms of these aesthetics or these thinkings about sort of death and maybe coloniality in some sense, and or how to portray this sort of thing in image form.
Hi, and thank you for the space and for this really I don't know, beautiful way of taking care of movies. I don't know, my thing about I guess that life and death might be like a long time obsession for quite some years, probably like after experience that I had close to death, and I guess that from that on, probably cinema has been a way of definitely not finding answers, but just to keep on the search. And for me, it doesn't really exist like a big difference. I feel it more of a limbo. That's probably why the movie is a bit like going in and out of, at least of that feeling, and that's probably as well why there is so many mixed layers where there is like the most common and mundane daily life stuff, and at the same time it's mixed with religion. I think everything comes together somehow, and I don't know. For me, it feels like a contradiction in a way, and I love it that way. I mean, that's what I was a bit after in the movie.
Yes.
So I don't know where to begin, but I guess I was raised in Mexico, and when I came here, so I was looking for a topic for a film. It's so completely different, Mexico and here, so I was kind of lost. And so my father, who's a historian, with whom I already worked in one film before, The Last Cristeros from 2011. I had just, because I began this Riel film like in 2013, so I was just finished. I was just like finishing like the festival tour with Los Últimos Cristeros. And he told me, why don't you take a look to Riel? He's a character that has fascinated me for many years. He was here in the early 70s to make some research about him, and so I took a look. I didn't know, of course, anything about him, and so I began to read all that I can, and in a way the historical moment was really fascinating, I think it's the most fascinating topic in North America, like in the States and in Canada. Like, I mean, fascinating, but more grave, the extermination of
important.
yeah, like of the indigenous people here. So I began to read about it, and I began to read about the extermination of the bison, how there was just 500 bison in the 85 when we died, and before like 40 years before that there was 80 million bisons. And I was really fascinated by that, also by the construction of the train of the Pacific Railway, which was again a way used by white men to exterminate also First Nations. And so I saw again The Shining, and how it's built, how this hotel is built on an old cemetery and all these ghosts. So how all these societies are built on indigenous graveyards, basically. And I saw again Dead Man by Jim Jarmusch, and I saw it through this lens. For example, at the beginning, it begins with the train, and the dead man, Johnny Depp, asks where is the train headed, and the last stop of the train is Machine. So it all kind of began to make sense also with our time, like how at that moment it was for me like a Pandora box, where everything began to accelerate. Like the destruction began very early, like very long before, but that's where it really began to go very fast, like a ziggurat of a man with the camera. And so I loved the context, and it's kind of hors champ. It's kind of off screen in the film. I mean, there's maybe the train, and there's little glimpse at the bison, and you don't really see the death of the indigenous people, but you hear it or you understand it. But it's all there, but it's not really like in the image. It's maybe in the sound a little bit. So yeah, I began to work on a project, and that project became more and more little in terms of production, because at that time I made 3 feature films in Mexico, but here it was like beginning again. So in a way, I mean, at the beginning it was a more ambitious film in terms of production, but little by little, like, I didn't found really some support here for producing it. And so I decided, since the beginning I had the idea, au pire, I will do it like myself inside a cell. And that's what happened after some time. And yeah, and I've also been fascinated, of course, also by death. I think we all are. In the Japanese film, there's the 2 topics that are always in art, which is love and death, right? And so I'm like everyone, I'm fascinated by those 2 topics. And it was quite an experience to make this film, because it kind of inhabited me. Like I was really experiencing that, like during the editing, during the shooting, like all these repetitions of these words, and so I was kind of possessed a little bit by it for some time. like waking up at night a little bit, like yeah, just like the just looking dead in front.
Renato, do you want to say a few things about the
About
three films?
Yeah, of course. Can I just say something in French first?
Bien sûr.
Yeah, merci. Tout d'abord, merci pour l'invitation. Je tiens aussi à dire que, à titre de représentant de Spirale et donc du milieu des revues culturelles aussi, on est aussi un milieu qui est très présenté quand même par la possibilité de disparaître et par des morts souvent annoncées par des politiques culturelles ou autres. Donc, c'est très important quand même qu'on fasse, je pense, des événements comme ça, où on peut pas être critique ensemble et qu'on peut faire la solidarité entre vues. Donc, merci beaucoup vraiment aux organisatoristes de cet événement. Spirale est très content d'être impliqué dans cet événement très important, puisque comme on sait aussi, il y a plusieurs revues qui malheureusement se sont éteintes dans les derniers mois aussi. Et donc, c'est même pas une mort annoncée, c'est une mort bien réelle aussi. Donc, c'est assez important, je pense, d'essayer de maintenir des espaces de vie culturelle et critique comme ceci. Donc, vraiment, oui, merci beaucoup. Si ça ne dérange pas, je reste un petit peu en français, puis ensuite je passerai à l'anglais pour pas trop torturer les gens avec mon accent. Oui, eh bien, moi-même, well, I was preparing myself for this event. I was looking at this description, at the name, Chronicles about death, foretold, and I was trying maybe to read like the Gospel of John. I was reading I saw the trailers as well, and was like, gosh, what am I going to do with that? Well, what am I going to do with those movies? And I was quite mesmerized, truth be told, because actually I didn't want to overly prepare myself to receive those movies. And I wanted to exert myself to have an effective criticism, like to see the movies and try to find the links between them. And of course, one of my, because it's my, those are parts of my obsessions, is the question of the archive, of course. And there's the archive in Rodriguez's movie, obviously with his writings and so and so. And in your movie as well, Roberto Tarazona, I believe there's something regarding the archive of progress, I believe, the archive of perhaps Cuban ideologies of Cuban cinema. And I wanted to ask you, before trying to interact with the first Japanese movie, how do you play in your movies, in your creation, with the archive of the voice, maybe of the body as well? I don't know, it's a really open question.
Well, for me, it has to do something a lot with memory, probably, and the way that we create a relationship with the memory. And it's for me, it's less of an intellectual explanation, but it's at least I try to go for a bit more about the feeling of remembering something, maybe, or evoking a memory or somebody from the past, or it can be as well the nostalgia, for example, about a landscape or somebody. So for me, it's the way that I work with the archive or with the pictures, for example, with the voices. For me, it's I don't know, a way of revisiting time as well. I think that it's very different the way that maybe still images plays or allows us to bring around time to it in a way, and the same with recorded voices and to combine them together or to create like a motion picture out of still, like somehow it forces time in a way, and therefore maybe it's memory is allowed to find a different way of articulating itself, or that's it.
So when I continue reading about Riel and when I decided to do a film about him also, like when you ask people about Riel, if they know who Riel is, they will answer he's the Métis chief, political leader, or a crazy lunatic. But what I was interested more in was his role as a prophet, and he declared himself a prophet of the New World, a prophet of the Métis, and his mission was a political mission, to defend Métis rights. So I saw that was the least known part of his life. So after that, I said, what is a prophet? And a prophet is la parole, it's the word. So that's when I decided that I was gonna structure the film with the words of Riel and his words. I thought that could be the best portrait of him through what he wrote and through what he said. And so of course I read a lot of biographies about him, but there's five tomes of his old writings. It's 5 tomes, so it must be like maybe 2,000 pages or something. So I decided it took some time to decide that I was just gonna take this part from when he's condemned until he's dead, he's executed. So yeah, these books are amazing, and you have all these letters, and you have and they're organized chronologically, and there are some newspaper articles that I took, for example, for the interview, and even these articles were a little bit romanticized, like they will describe he woke and he s'est levé de la chaise, you know, descriptions. Also, there's a description from a journalist from his execution, saying that he never saw a person so calm just before dying. So yeah, I took all these moments, and then another, like he was working for a long time on this text about the Métis. I just took a very little part, but he has like a 20 pages like expose about all the Métis situation. So yeah, basically I think all what's in the film are archives. I don't remember I wrote myself. Maybe there's 1 or 2 words, but I don't. Yeah, there's the scene with the kid.
Yeah. Like
it was more improvised. But yeah, all these letters are I saw some of his letters here in the archive, and yeah.
I'm interested in asking about the sort of the Cuban connection for you, Roberto, because I think, you know, as you were saying, there's this for you. Louis Riel was this sort of anchor to kind of, you know, as a Mexican person coming to Canada and sort of an outsider to Canada, kind of trying to understand the environment that you're in. And I think what's interesting for me here is this idea too that you're working in Cuba, coming from Spain, which is another Hispanic culture. That I think you kind of capture very almost a sort of. I've seen 2 of your films now, and it's kind of like there's this reverence about the environment. There's also a sort of fascination about the environment that you kind of render as this sort of, you know, ghostly kind of space. And I would be curious to hear about this sense of space and how you work in Cuba in particular.
Yeah, I think that probably as well, like that presence of landscape comes from the background of my family. Probably we come from my grandparents were farmers, and that's probably why I feel so attached, or I pay so much attention to the land and how the landscape behaves and how it forces lifestyles and probably that's the reason why. Like for me, it's not like it feels like another character in a way, or and it's also like a way of I don't know, if, like the way that I perceive things is much more dissolved. So for me, there's not a lot of difference between a body and a landscape, and yeah, and the body itself. So somehow I think that everything is completely connected. So probably that's why I tend to have that feeling that everything is more of a liquid, and memory somehow is, yeah, it's like watering scattered all over the landscape, and probably, yeah, it's an obsession for my grandparents that has been yeah, affecting me, I guess, and I'm happy about it, definitely. But yeah, it's yeah, probably that is the connection must be around that, I guess.
And how much of your father was involved with your film, Matias? Because there was a moment where when we were discussing the film, I think among the programming committee, and there was this sort of element also of kind of an homage. And of course, your father's alive. It's, you know, but we kind of, you know, you discover a film, and then discovering also his writings on the VN. You know, you've how much? Yeah, just I'm curious about that collaboration.
About that?
With your father, yeah.
It's interesting because in Los Últimos Cristeros, the main it's also historical, but it's an very free adaptation of a novel, and the novel is written by the son of the main character. He's a colonel. You say colonel?
Yeah.
He's a colonel from the revolution.
Yeah.
So his son is telling the story of his father during this Mexican part of the revolution. And in a way, I was doing a little bit the same with Los Últimos Cristeros, because my father is very known in Mexico for this topic of the Cristeros. So I was kind of doing also like an homage to my father, and in a way the Cristeros was the reason why my father went to Mexico, because he's originally from France, but then he discovered all this world that is also related to the land and to the peasants, to religion also, how the peasants were the ones that defended their right to believe. And then in Riel, it's a little bit the same also, because in a way I'm doing an homage to my father as a historian, and we kind of meet in interests, and Louis Riel also was mentioning his father a lot, like he wanted to be buried next to him. And also Louis Riel's father was the first one in the community to organize a strike against the Compagnie de Fourrure, because they weren't allowed. They could only kill the bison and then bring the skin, but they couldn't just keep the skin. They had to buy it from the Compagnie Bedutson or Red River Company, and he made a kind of strike also. So Louis Riel also admired him a lot, because he was also a rebel. So there's this kind of filiation. I don't know if you said that, filiation. Yeah, inheritance, and then there's my daughter that is playing Little, the son of Louis Riel. So yeah, and of course it was pretty difficult to produce this film, and so it took me like 10 years, but in the meantime I did another couple of films. So there was a lot of I'm not gonna do this film, I'm gonna do this film, I'm not gonna do this film, I'm gonna do this film. And there was this moment where my father came, and yeah, we made a trip together to Manitoba, and we went to Batoche, and not to Manitoba, to Saskatchewan, sorry. and we went to Batoche, and we saw the places where the battles happened, and then some years after he came here, and we went to the l'archevêché to see with our own eyes the letters that Riel wrote to Monseigneur Taché, and Riel also studied here in Montreal, so we went to see the school where he studied, and in a moment we were walking in the Mont Royal, and he began to tell me a moment about Riel's life, and he had tears in his eyes. And so in that moment I said, like, okay, I have to do the film. You know, like I felt his emotion, so I also felt as a kind of homage that I had to do that film also.
I think we're almost already out of time, unfortunately, but maybe I'd love to if you have any closing words or closing remarks or analysis for us, Renato, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, of course. Can I say it in French?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Oui, mais je pense que, aussi pour essayer de revenir aussi au premier film dont on a un peu le temps de parler aussi, je pense que j'essaie de voir des connexions. I try to see some connections between the three movies. Et pour moi, c'est sûr qu'il y a quelque chose comme un avertissement par rapport au fait de se souvenir aussi. C'est notamment, évidemment, très explicite dans le premier film. Parce que se souvenir, c'est pas nous qui possédons la mémoire, c'est la mémoire qui nous possède aussi. Puis, même si les autres films après avaient peut-être une façon d'avancer plus loin dans la dissolution, j'ai beaucoup apprécié pour ma part cette espèce de bouquet que vous essayez de constituer, je pense, pour essayer comme de nous rappeler que justement se souvenir, c'est toujours périlleux en quelque sorte. Moi-même, quand je voyais le premier film, il y avait quelque chose qui me touchait beaucoup parce que peut-être que je suis néphrotique ou peut-être que je suis mélancolique, mais je repensais beaucoup à la légende d'Orphée, le fait que se retourner sur le passé, c'est jamais s'en débarrasser, c'est juste en revivre comme constamment la mort éternelle. Et je sais pas trop ce que j'en ai avec ça, mais c'est quelque chose qui m'a beaucoup habité avec la projection de ce soir. C'était la réflexion.
Merci. Roberto, Matias, Renato, merci beaucoup. Merci à vous. Bonne soirée, on se retrouve demain peut-être au cinéma moderne. Merci.